Hello and welcome to this ExchangeWire interview. I'm John Still, ExchangeWire's Head of Content, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Brant from Vevo. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you, and a Happy New Year as well.
Happy New Year. Yeah, I've got to get my brain in gear, haven't I?
Exactly the same here. We'll see how this goes. Well, we are kicking off the year with a bang. We are going to be discussing the world of video and the world of CTV with Rich today. To start off with, Rich, just give us a little overview about yourself and what you do at Vevo.
Sure. My name's Richard Brant. So I am Senior Director of Advanced TV Strategy and Partnerships. So it's quite a broad title, but it's really kind of encompassing of what's going on in the industry. There's lots of broad brushstroke things going on at the moment, which we've got to try and get our heads around. So my role kind of, my background is both digital and TV. I've had time at Sky. I've had time at agencies as well. So got a fairly big, broad understanding of what's going on out there. But there's plenty of kind of moving parts at the moment, as I'm sure we'll dig into.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to test your broad understanding to the limits
Exactly.
today. Excellent. Well, like I say, thank you very much for joining us. I want to kick off by seeing what you think are the major challenges that are going to face CTV, the video outlook for the whole of the year. Let me know what you think's going to be ruffling the feathers.
I think a big challenge for the industry right now is trying to unbox TV, let alone connected TV, because of the fragmentation that's happening and continues to happen across many different platforms. You've got a scenario where lots of buyers have approached it from maybe a digital background and not kind of thinking of the bigger picture of how viewing is happening, and then discounting certain elements of buying because there's only one way into that route and we've got to find another route and pull them all together. And therefore that fragmentation is not only happening on a viewing side, it's happening on a buying side as well, as to how we're actually doing it. So that in itself is a big challenge, and there are steps in place, and it's happening, and you can see the kind of movement happening out there. But don't get me wrong, it's a massive challenge for agencies, for buyers to start kind of pulling together all those different elements, pulling together AV teams to work more closely with digital teams, trying to decipher what is and isn't TV within certain platforms as well, which again we can kind of go into in a little bit more detail too. But that's one element to it. But then I think there's almost a bigger problem that we're going to come across this year, and I think that's really more trust in content, and what can we decipher what TV is by the kind of concept. Because you've got the likes of ITV and Channel 4 now leaning into YouTube and distributing content there and being watched on the TV screen, and it's clearly TV because it came from a broadcaster. How do we start to, as an industry, still maintain the qualities of TV in a world of such big fragmentation? And you're going to have a scenario in this year, tail end of this year, maybe next year, of Gen AI explosions. What's trustable in terms of video? The abundance of video, does it lower the quality of overall, parity of ability to actually fund quality as well? Because you end up having a scenario where it's all about audience will drag the CPM down, and therefore the quality content and the editorial content doesn't get as much of the ability to actually make that content. And there's plenty of studies out there, from the likes of ThinkBox to studies we've done with like Amplified Intelligence or Channel 4 with Flood, about how content does matter, and particularly in a world where looking at any study where the rub of being around editorial high quality content, coming from trusted sources, makes a big difference to brand building. And how does that fit into a world where actually the platform doesn't matter anymore? And how do we kind of start to decipher which bits fit into the branding part and which bits fit into the lower funnel part, and does it matter which platform we're buying those through? They're two different campaigns.
Yeah, no, and that's it's one of the huge questions for the year, is this question of quality, I think, and you're dead on in terms of how that's going to fit into the CTV landscape and the generation, the AI boom that we're seeing at the moment. You touched on kind of the challenges there for the buy side as well, and how advertisers are managing to unsilo and approach TV. What do you think is the state of like the programmatic landscape for TV and the inventory that's on offer there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to disappoint a few by saying there's not going to be a sudden boom this year. I think there will be increase, don't get me wrong, but it will be tempered by the, not reluctance, but treading carefully of certain elements of the industry. And obviously you name traditional broadcasters obviously clearly have a hesitance to kind of throw their content into the kind of, not the open market, but into kind of that scenario of being able to qualify, does this content, is it the same quality as this, and so on like that. So there is potentially a lot to lose from that scenario, but that's not to say it won't be programmatic. There's definitely going to be more programmatic solutions, but maybe not in the way buyers would like, in that you can pick and choose impressions off the broadcaster that fit into this campaign. Is probably going to be more programmatically activated, but more direct basis in that scenario. So I think that will be more of a case of a push to more automation in that buying sphere, but picking those publishers in that way.
Yeah, so more of a hybrid hybrid outlook for the buyers.
But I think harking back to what we just said there, is that there's no difference there from the way we've always bought TV, in that you would always pick your best publishers as a TV buyer, therefore to kind of build a brand and build resonance and build reach and suddenly get that message across. And there's always room for the DR TV campaign, where you're more kind of scattergunning across the TV sphere, and that's just moved digitally. And actually there's more cool targeting tools that we can actually use on top of that as well. So I don't think the concept's ever changed. It's just the artificial restriction of technology that's kind of hampering a lot of things here.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I want to go back to something you said in the first question there regarding the consumption habits, and it's how not just the channels and the platforms are changing, but where the audience lies as well. Yeah. And we are seeing a change in consumption habits. I know a lot's being made of the incredibly slow death of linear TV. It's still there, but it's it's on its way, we think. But how are you seeing these consumption habits change? Where are the consumers, and how can advertisers really keep up as well? Yeah, I mean, objectively, you can kind of look at the way that Ofcom reports have changed over the last few years, and it's been, obviously massively accelerated by COVID, and the way that everything kind of got exaggerated. It's kind of snapped back a little bit, but definitely not in the way it was. And yeah, I mean, you can clearly see, broadcast are by traditional standards in terms of linear and broadcast of VOD and playback and so on like that, used to easily be the 70% big share of lion's share of that. It's now, by Ofcom's report, around about the 56% from an adult point of view, but it's down to almost kind of 25% from a 1634 point of view. So if that's the litmus test of where that's going to filter up into different age groups, you've got a massive scattering of what's going on there. But the other challenge as well is that, particularly on the 1634 side, is 25% of that time is with an SVOD. And the SVODs, as big as that is, advertisable inventory out of them is still relatively small in that 25% kind of time. And then you've still got the kind of growth of where YouTube is there, and that's actually, if you look at where they are, YouTube, time spent with YouTube is the same as broadcast now from 1634s, and 8% of that is on a TV screen, which is the same as broadcast of VOD. So the scenario here is actually that age group, and which will obviously gravitate through all the age groups eventually. They all think they'll live forever right now, but they'll get as old as me. but ultimately, that is where things are going, and it's only going to exaggerate further as more they get dragged further different areas with the content. And I suppose that to that point is where content comes back into it, because actually, and you'll see the way that Vevo has always had to approach it, because the music industry has been through as much disruption as you would ever imagine, from Napster to everything else. Being on the front foot to go, right, well, we can't fight what the consumer wants, we need to be where they want us to be. So kind of engaging quite early with the likes of YouTube, and obviously distributing through different channels now as they become available. But you can obviously see some of the traditional broadcasters now, leaning in, Channel 4,
has now tripled its content into YouTube as it's seen the success it's had in finding, as a public service broadcaster with the remit to find younger audiences, has had to kind of shift that way. And of course, ITV has had to do the same in kind of moving forward too. But it doesn't make sense to expect people to turn up to your platform. You have to find where they are and find the path of least resistance, and that's
Yeah, absolutely, and that's, you know, that goes the same for the creators as well as, you know,
Exactly.
for the channels, the publishers, the audiences, and also, you know, we have this new swathe of creators. Vevo is, you know, a well-recognised home for videos. How are you finding the creators adapting to life on across different platforms in a fragmented landscape?
Yeah, I mean, again, we kind of in a lucky position that we straddle lots more. We're broadcast linear channels, and we also have these amazing global artists who are creating content all the time and kind of putting it into the network. And the success that we often find is almost, you know, a repeat of what I've just said, is following the viewer, finding where they are, but also being clever as to use other social platforms, for example, to cut, you know, videos in the way that will kind of attract and are fit for purpose. And, you know, obviously TikTok's a good example of that, as to how you would then use that platform to entice and pull people through to bigger content and bigger interaction. A lot of the time what we see is, as soon as you get listeners or fans or viewers into certain, you know, a new release, or a find out about a new or old artist that's new to you, suddenly the back catalogue starts to kind of get lots of spikes, and they listen through the whole back catalogue of videos within that scenario as well. So using them to affect and kind of finding out exactly, and creators know their audiences better than anybody. They're doing that day in, day out. They know what works, and they know how to kind of resonate with their fans. So they are creating the content that will proliferate into all those different areas and pull them back into the kind of fan bases in that scenario too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of choice for them in terms of, you know, finding where their fans are. We've talked a little bit to start with about this fragmentation across all the platforms, and, you know, there's lots of brand plus things appearing across streaming services.
Yeah.
Everyone's offering their own sort of little niche, or their you know, their own back catalogue, like you said. How does the industry adapt to this fragmentation? Do we need to look at standardisation? Do we need to look at kind of, you know, joint industry measurement techniques and stuff? Where do you see the standardisation amongst the fragmentation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few potential things that will happen there. You mentioned all the plus scenarios and all that, and you know, it isn't really sustainable in the long term. You know, there's a roughly 3 to 4 subscriptions per person or per household in the UK, probably slightly higher in the US. And, you know, don't have any fingers to how many services there are out there. So there could be that scenario of consolidation of some of those services into either acquisitions or folding and pushing their content into other platforms that would then obviously kind of house it for them. So there has to be something on that point. But I think in terms of then going back to your main question there, is that yes, the answer, I think we do need some standardisation. It kind of harks back to, you know, ensuring content makers can sustain a future as well. Yes, there's too many at the moment, but at the same time, even when you get to a scenario where they're all in a few platforms, there still needs to be that kind of monetisation of, you know, that content at its worth. Yeah. We've done a lot of, I think I mentioned earlier, obviously, likes of Amplified Intelligence and Flood research with Channel 4 and other publishers as well, about the nuances of content. And a good example of that would be within the YouTube sphere, for example, which is the #1 app around the world on TVs. But of course, the reasons to go to YouTube vary enormously, like as to why someone's gone to watch some content. So if you were there to watch Taylor Swift's new video, you're there on appointment, you're there to sit back and watch that because you're a massive fan, and you put it on the TV screen, which is no hard feat on YouTube as well to kind of search it down. So there's a very specific reason why they've gone there, and they're very intently in there. And the same with, say, a Channel 4 show or something like that. You sit back, relax, you're watching TV because it just happens to be through YouTube. And then there's a scenario of, trying to, some sort of hobby or a creator or something like that, where advertising jars a little bit with that scenario because it's not expected in the same kind of thing, and the kind of the brand rub from that kind of editorial oversight, quality made for TV and broadcast and masses, slightly to someone in their bedroom just making something, or something that's very personal to you, or trying to fix a tap or something like that. Yeah. Again, I don't really need an ad there, I've got a leak in my roof sort of thing. So so those kind of things we've really tried to pull apart with some of the research that we've done recently, and there are some really notable differences in that. So kind of shifting perceptions in that, and trying to kind of think about what is the standard of content to enable that old brand in a new world, because I'm not saying that using YouTube is a bad thing. Absolutely one of the best ways to push down the funnel and get some value back from kind of ROI. But if we just plough money into there and don't think about the nuances, then you miss out on that branding and brand equity for the future, and you're always relying on that kind of short term in that scenario. So I think that's definitely on a standardisation of content, but from a measurement point of view, see some advances there already. We are Audience Project, Nielsen, now getting integrations with Google Ad Manager, so we can now actually measure YouTube versus other platforms and dedupe the results in terms of kind of reach, and actually doesn't matter it was on YouTube, it's now one reach curve and it was around that content, so that's the most important thing. And the likes of Barb with their kind of framework around fit for TV and so on like that, so, as an editorial website, would it be broadcasted effectively, and does it meet this criteria? Again, not going, you guys are in, you guys are out. It's just, if you're a creator and you have an editorial oversight and you make high quality and it could be broadcast, then absolutely you're in that criteria, if you know what I mean. So I think there needs to be these loose scenarios, but there does need to be those standards that allow buyers to now make kind of informed decisions as to what is the modern day TV experience and how can I keep my brand safe, get transparency out of the content that I'm kind of buying, and know that ultimately I'm buying into that. There's editorial oversight. I've got less risk about what I could potentially be around in a world where there's piles of video flying out there now.
Yeah, no, exactly, and to your point about about where the ads are appearing and what's appropriate on YouTube, I'm still trying to explain to my daughter why she's seeing an advert for online trading companies before songs from Moana. So we'll get to that with YouTube. I'm sure there's that standardisation play is on the cards for the.
You're thinking about your future, though. No.
That's it. Let's get her involved. Good, needs to for my pension. Anyway, I just before we go, thanks so much for that conversation. I just want to see what excites you in the sphere for 2025. What are you looking forward to working on and seeing?
Yeah, I think some of the things I've mentioned today is especially around that kind of building out the nuance of where I said it already, YouTube is the #1 app. We can't ignore that. Yeah. It is part of the TV sphere, but how do we use it in an effective TV way, I suppose, is the way to kind of think about it moving forward. And the work that we've done there, and some of the moves that Google are doing as well. I mean, we've got, and it is widely available now, that publishers like Vevo or Channel 4 or Paramount and so on like that have now the ability to spend with us, will now contribute to Google deals, for example. So that was never a case before, and it obviously kind of allowing a bit more of the handbrake to come off and allow a bit more flow of actually I can isolate these channels and I'm not double spending here and not contributing to this over here. So that trading mechanics like that, kind of allowing a bit more kind of freedom in the kind of purchase of what is effectively a streaming platform, but with a hell of a lot of choice, is definitely kind of for us a really important a step forward. But also kind of that kind of thought process allows buyers now to kind of have that more kind of, actually, is this right for my content, and is this the best way that I could be using something like YouTube alongside my traditional broadcast platforms and so on like that, and Amazon's and Netflix and so on like that, to maximise my reach and not be hamstrung by some of the artificial problems.
Yeah, no, totally fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that, Rich. That was great. And yeah, thanks for joining me and wishing you every success for 2025.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching. We are back for 2025 and see you throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.